Wow, I've been preaching a long time, but that's the first time I've ever been asked to preach after Who's Your Daddy? Good night. Happy Father's Day. You might think, as you can see on the screen, you might think it a little strange, maybe a little weird that your guest speaker on Father's Day is going to give you a message on marriage. Well, here's my thesis and here's the drive for it. It's my thinking that one of the greatest gifts a father can give his children is to love their mother. You believe that? I really think that's one of the greatest gifts a dad can give his children. My wife and I, 2 weeks ago yesterday, celebrated our anniversary. I'll tell you a little more about that in a few minutes. And my son gave us a card that I thought was pretty sweet and right on. He said, "Thanks for everything you have taught me through the years. Most of all, thanks for loving each other." David Wilkerson was Assembly of God evangelist who wrote a great book called The Cross and the Switchblade. And he said one time, early in my ministry, I read this, that the greatest security I had when I was growing up was that I knew my mother and daddy loved each other. That's a great quote. The greatest security I had is that I knew my parents loved each other. When I went home, they were there. Never had to worry. Great security. So, I realize not everyone in this room is married. For you that are married, I'm going to give you some encouragement this morning. For you guys that are not married, go to school. Maybe you can learn some things, maybe challenge you about your life when you do get ready to get married. Title of the message is this: Marriages are made in heaven, but they're lived out in California. Amen. Made in heaven, but lived out in California. Now, I'm going to talk to you this morning about a successful marriage. And when I say successful marriage, I'm not talking about you two just tolerating each other, or just staying together for the kids' sake, or just existing with no joy, no fun, not much communication, not much laughter, not much affection, and no real anticipation for the future. If I had a theme verse, here it is. God said to men, "Rejoice with the wife of your youth." I think what God is saying to you guys is this: as you get older, as you grow older, I want you to still have a great time with that girl you married when you were young. Now, there are too many examples in our culture of marriage failures. Let's take a moment and recognize some success stories in the room. All of you that have been married 20 years or more, would you stand, please, all around the building? You've been married 20 years or more. Stand. All right, stay up. Stay up, stay up. That's great. If you're 30 years or more, remain standing. If you're 30 years or more, remain standing. Okay, good, good, good. 40 years or more, remain standing. Still doing good. Okay, 50 years or more. Let's hear it for Carl Coakley and his sweetheart. 64 years. That's terrific. I have a friend named Clark Bozier, worked with me 6 or 7 years when I was pastoring in Odessa. I was there 36 years, the same church. And he now pastors a great growing church in the west side of Fort Worth. They had a new members reception, had 40 or so people there, and they were going around the room, everyone introducing themselves and telling a little something about themselves. So this older couple, this man was doing all the talking, and he told about them. And then he came to the close and he said, "My wife and I have been married for 67 years. And everybody oohed and awed as we do. And somebody asked the inevitable question: how do you keep a marriage together for 67 years? And Clark said his little wife talked for the first time, and she said, "He just won't die." Well, on June the 2nd, here's a picture. Her name's Freddie. She and I have been married 2 weeks ago yesterday, 60 years. How about that? Pretty proud of that. But I am not an authority on marriage and raising kids. Before I got married, I was an authority on it, but I'm not an authority anymore. Before I got married, I could have written or preached a sermon called 10 Steps to Have a Great Marriage and Raise Perfect Kids Who Will Never Fail or Let You Down. And then I got married. And after 6 years of marriage, my subject would be like, here are 3 things you might, but probably should not try, that could, but probably will not work. You see, all of my beautiful theories got murdered by a gang of ugly facts. When Freddie and I got married, we didn't know anything. We didn't really even suspect anything. We knew we loved each other. And here came the kids. I was a staff intern at the church in those days, and our only daughter, Cheryl, was born 10 and a half months after we were married. And I know it was 10 and a half months because every single person in our church was counting on their fingers as the month went by to make sure that baby was legitimate when it got here. And then 2.5 years later, Alan was born, and then 9 years later, Kyle David was born. We should have named him Encore. He wasn't on the program, he just showed up there. When Cheryl was born, we were so paranoid that nothing touched her mouth that had not been pasteurized, sanitized, sterilized, homogenized, and we wore gloves. By the time we got to Kyle David, he shared his bottle with a dog. We figured it out. But a good marriage is so beautiful. You know something, guys? When your marriage is right, almost everything in your world will be right. And when your marriage gets messed up, almost everything in your world can really get messed up. So what makes a good marriage? Well, there's obviously not an easy answer. I don't think there's a magical formula, but there are some wonderful biblical guidelines and some good common sense that I think works. So first of all, I'm going to take a moment and glorify what God is glorified about marriage. Marriages are made in heaven. Here's a definition of marriage on your screen that I think is one of the best ones I've seen. It says, marriage is a commitment of love between 2 people, which binds them together for life. And the fact of their marriage is known and recognized by their own society. In the biblical story of creation, God, in the first 5 days of creation, created all this stuff that's around us. Universe, earth, all the stuff that's on the earth, animals and everything. On the 6th day, God created a man. For the first 5 days, at the end of the day, God said, this is very good. On the 6th day, he created a man, and for the first time, God said, it's not good for man to be alone. So he made a woman to walk by his side. The biblical story says God took a rib and made a woman. Did you guys ever give that any thought? That Adam had one more rib than you have because God took that? Do you ever wonder? Do you ever count your ribs and wonder which one was missing? Wonder which rib God took? Well, I'm here to clear it up. When Adam was created, he had a rib that came right across here. That's the one he used to create Eve. The reason he had it right across here, it was to hold his stomach in. So if your husband has a pot belly, lady, it's not his fault, it's your fault, because God took that rib to make you. So don't ever forget that. So God made a woman to walk by his side. He said, it's not good for man to be alone. My mom and dad were married 64 years. And a couple of years after Dad died, I was talking to Mom, and she said, you know what I miss? And I said, I don't know, Mom. She said, I miss someone to hold my hand. It's not good for man to be alone. So the Bible says, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they become one flesh. Now, a lady told me one time, my evaluation of the creation story is this. God made man, took one look at him and said, I can do better than that, and then he made a woman. My story is God made man first so he could tell one story in his life without being interrupted and corrected by his wife. That's my story. But God put in some guidelines from the beginning, and we noted them in this verse. God said, first of all, a man should leave his father and mother. That's a legal and public act of marriage that's recognized by your society. Whatever your society recognizes as an act of marriage, I think God recognizes as the act of marriage. Second, that marriage, that leaving is to be based upon cleaving to each other. It's a love that glues you together. It's a commitment to a permanent, lasting relationship, till death do us part. God said a man should leave his father and mother because he is glued to this one that he loves, and they become one flesh. Of course, that's the physical act of marriage, the sexual act, but it's more than that. It's two people becoming one person in life. Now, our culture's turned this around some. In our culture today, people start dating and sometimes they're in the sack and then maybe they fall in love and then maybe they get married. And we've taken God's deal and flipped it and wonder why we're having a whole lot of problems with that. Or sometimes we just move in together. Who needs a piece of paper? The problem is most people who move in together don't get married. Of course you don't. There's no commitment, there's no vows. It's easy to run away from that, covered with even more emotional scars and emotional baggage that you had when you went into it. Marriage is God's plan, and God has not changed his mind about marriage. This verse from the New Testament. When Jesus came into this world, he said, "So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate." And when I say marriage is made in heaven, I don't mean God picks out your husband or picks out your wife, but the institution of marriage and its protection and its guidelines and its joy are of God. Marriages were made in heaven, but they're lived out in California for you guys. If marriages are made in heaven, we find out pretty quickly there's a kind of a collision between heaven and earth. And of course there are difficulties. And I will name several as we work our way through. First of all, dating is not a true picture of marriage. Freddie and I dated 18 months before we got, but dating is not a true picture of marriage. You know that. We ought to call dating the Watergate period, because that's the problem, time we're covering up everything so this perfect person will marry us and make us happy for the rest of our lives. Freddie didn't marry the real me. She dated my representative, who I sent to date her. And my representative was a cleaned up version of me. He was a really nice guy. I have a friend named Charles Lowry. We had to speak all the time when I was in Odessa, and still speaks for the church there. He said, when I started dating my wife, Penny, I knew I was way out of my league. I was in over my head, so I was doing everything perfect. And he said one day, Penny turned to me and said, "Charles, do you like to go to the mall?" And he said, I lied like a snake. He said, I looked at her and said, "Oh, Penny, I love to go to the mall." And he said, God heard me say that. And he turned to the birth angel and said, Charles is lying to her. When he gets married, give them 3 girls. He'll spend his life in the mall. You see, when you get married, you're going to learn some things you didn't know, and some of these things will bring you joy, and some of them will create problems. Love is blind, but marriage is a real eye-opener. And one of the points I'm going to kind of make as we go along, another reason that dating is a distorted picture of marriage is that in too many marriages, how we treated each other when we're dating stops when we get married. Second reason marriage is tough is because we're so different. And I'm not talking about men and women are obviously different, but I'm talking about people are different. They're just natural differences between two people. One likes to go to bed early, the other likes to stay up late. One likes country music, the other likes classic. One is always prompt, the other's always late. One is a babbling brook, the other's a dead sea. One likes to spend money, the other's a tightwad. One loves to cuddle, the other's a porcupine. We're just different. My friend Charles Lowry said his wife Penny is not only beautiful, she's organized. She believes cleanliness is next to godliness, and everything has its place and it better be there. He said, I knew I was in trouble when she cleaned up the rice at the wedding. Before we went on our honeymoon, she cleaned it all up. He said, if you look in her closet, it's color-coded, and all the shoes face north. And there was a time I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and she made the bed while I was in the bathroom. Said, that's probably why God brought her into my life. I think cleanliness is next to impossible. I think a poster bed is for pants and shirts and underwear. said she has beautiful matching towels and they're all color-coded. He said, I'd only have 2 towels. One would be wet, one would be dry. I'd use them 6 months, throw them away, and get a new pet. So he said, why did God bring us together? He said, God likes to laugh. That's why he put us together. Sometimes I wonder how any of us make it because we're so different. Years ago, when I was a lot younger, somebody wrote a book called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, and that's pretty accurate. Like a woman dresses to express herself. Freddie will come out with 5 or 6 different tops or different outfits, and finally she'll come out and I'll say, okay, you like that one? No, but we've got to go. I mean, she's expressing herself and it's hard. Now, most men just dress to keep from being naked. I mean, takes a woman forever to figure it out, but me, I grab pants, a shirt. If they don't stink too bad, have no visible stains, I've got an outfit right on the spot. A woman has a purse. It's one of many, many purses. A man carries a wallet. A man doesn't have a formal wallet and a casual wallet. He doesn't have a color-coded wallet. He just has a wallet. When I get ready to go to bed at night, my bed is covered with pillows. It takes forever to clean the bed off so we can go to bed. And I've tried to reason with that woman. How many heads do we have in this organization? I have 1 head. How many heads you got? You got 1 head. We only need 2 pillows, but no, they're all there because we're just different. We drive differently. To me, driving is competition. That's the reason she says we need to stop at the rest stop, and I say, no. If I stop, that pickup that I took forever to get around will pass me. No, no. To a man, the solution to being lost is to drive faster. One guy said, marriage is not so hard, it's the living together that's hard. And he's right, because we are so different. Now look, man, can I give you guys some advice from somebody that's been down the trail? You will never understand her. If you meet a guy that says, I understand my wife, he's lying to you. He doesn't understand his wife. We don't understand a woman. They're different. Don't try to understand her, but do this. God gave you some wisdom in James chapter 1 when he said, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Let me go over that again. Swift to hear. Guy asked me not long ago, do you have some marriage advice? I said, yeah. Shut up and listen. Be swift to hear. You're not to out-argue, out-shout, out-angry. No, shut up and listen. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Now, I've got about a 2-minute video. Maybe you've seen it, but I think it's so funny, and it goes with this thought of just listening, understanding. Here it is.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't
Try to see things my way, so I have to keep on talking till...
The next thing that makes sometimes marriage difficult is what I call the grass is greener complex, which is also the danger of comparing. Because when you get married, you know, and after you've been married a while, you realize, whoa, this is not a perfect person I married. And we're not. And so we think, wow, my husband's not perfect, my wife's not perfect, but there's this person at work, I think they're perfect. There's this lady in the neighborhood, I think she's perfect. No. I want you to understand, there are no perfect people. There are no perfect people. But for some reason, we think there are. I read a 90-year-old psychiatrist who said, every person on earth has about 10 good traits and about 10 bad traits. And after you get married, if you go to seed on the 10 bad traits, and that's all you think about and worry about, instead of enjoying the 10 good traits, then all of a sudden you'll say, my wife, my husband's not perfect. You see, that's what the devil had Eve to start doing in the Garden of Eden. You're being cheated. Your life could be better. I know you've got all these trees, but you can't eat of this tree. If you could eat of this tree, then your life would be better. And Eve bought that. She didn't talk it over with God. She didn't talk it over with her husband. And she was wrong. Life was not easier. What we all need to realize is marriage is not easy. Marriage works because two good people are willing to work very hard to make it successful. You're willing to have patience. You're willing to overlook a lot of things. You're willing to hang on. You're willing to let love be your first guide. And you put your marriage in the hand of God. And you've realized that marriage is the most satisfying and rewarding of all life's experiences, but it takes work. So after you've been married a while, sometimes they go to a pastor, used to come to me, and they'd say, Jerry, I think I married the wrong person. And my answer was, that's okay. Everybody did. Everybody married the wrong person. Because we're two different people. Look, let me say it again. Life does not have to be perfect to be wonderful. Please listen to that statement. Life doesn't have to be perfect. Our marriage can be 90% good and 10% not so good. And if you're not careful, you'll spend all your time worrying and going to seed on the 10% that's not so good instead of enjoying the 90% that's good. So there's three essential commitments I challenge you to make. First of all, accept that other person. Give up on changing them. We can tear people up. You can tear this person up you're married to by constantly trying to make them over into this fantasy you have in your head of what a husband or a wife ought to be. Accept them like Adam accepted Eve as a gift of God. And second, be attentive to them. Give them time, meet their needs, submit to them. Put that other person first in your life. Make him a king, make her a queen. That's what you did in your date life. That's what brought you together. That's the reason you fell in love. Put them first and give them attention. Your world's centered around them in your date life. It still should. Paul said in Ephesians 5, submit to one another. I heard somebody say one time, marriage is 50-50. No, it's not. Marriage is 100-100. I'm to give the best of all that I am to Freddie Mae, and she in return. Be attentive. And third, be affectionate. Look, may I talk to you guys for just a few minutes? This wife you're married to is a romantic person, and she wants and she needs affection. Romance. Affection should be a canopy that covers your marriage. So let me ask you a series of questions, guys, honestly. How long has it been since you were just romantic? How long has it been since you did the stuff that made you fall in love with each other in the beginning? How long since you had a romantic dinner together? How long since you had a romantic weekend together, just the two of you? How long since you were just sweet? How long since you were fun to live with? Now, some of you guys are saying right now, I hear you. Come on, preacher. I ain't a lover. I'm a lawyer. I'm a carpenter. I'm a car salesman. I ain't a lover. No, bud, you're wrong. She married you because you were a lover. She didn't marry you because you were a carpenter or car salesman. She married you because you were a lover. And you were a good one too, you smooth-talking devil. You were a good one. I'll tell you how good you were. She bought it. And she thought that's the way it was always going to be. Now, what were you doing? What were you doing when you were dating, when you were getting to know each other? First of all, you spent quality time together. I know your life after you're married gets busy, but whoa. When you were dating, you spent I don't care if the fish are biting. I don't care what's on Sports Center. I don't care when the golf guys are out there. I don't care what was going on in your life. You were not going through a day without quality time with that girl with which you're falling in love. And you talked and you talked and you talked and you talked and you talked. We had the largest church in our city when I pastored, so I married hundreds of couples. And I'd say, well, sometime, why do you guys think you love each other? And they always said, without exception, they said, oh, Jerry, we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk. Go to a restaurant after church today and sit down and look around the restaurant, and you will tell the difference between the married couples and the unmarried couples. Unmarried couples talk and smile. And what would you like? Oh, just bring me a lettuce salad with lime spritz. I hardly ever eat anything at all. And they're smiling and they're holding hands and they're patting and, and they're drooling down one side of their mouth. What are married people doing? They're chewing and looking around. And we talk a little past the salt, past the pepper, stuff like that. But you fell in love communicating. And there were love notes. Some of you guys became poets. And there was candy, just because you're so sweet. And there was flowers, just because you're so beautiful. And do you remember when you noticed and complimented everything? Do you remember walking in to pick her up? And there she stood, and you said, whoa, oh, wow, you're so beautiful. It took my breath. Wow, I love your hair. Love it when you wear your hair that way. Ooh, I love that perfume you're wearing. I love that dress. That dress looks great on you. I love your mother. I love those shoes you got on. Remember that? Remember that? Have you forgotten that? Remember when you called her just to hear her voice? Huh? You got ready to leave, she put her hand in your arm and you walked out to the car. And when you got to the car, she took her hand off your arm and reached for the car door. And you said, you remember? You said, whoa, honey, no. As long as you're with me, those beautiful hands of yours will never touch a car door. I will always open the door for you and shut it. And you shut the door softly and you went around and sat down and you turned. You remember saying this? What would you like to do tonight? And she said, oh, whatever you, no. As long as you're with me, it'll never be what I want to do. It will always be what you want to do. Where would you like to eat tonight? Oh, whatever you, no, honey, I want you to understand. It'll never be what I want to eat. It will always be what you want to eat. In other words, our whole approach is what will make you happy. Why'd you ever quit? You see, we've all got a love tank. It's like a gas tank. Probably when you two first started getting together, meeting, whatever, probably maybe both of your love tanks were empty. But something began to happen. You're spending time together. You couldn't explain it. You couldn't define it. But the love tank began to fill up. It got a quarter full and a half full and then 3/4 full. And all of a sudden, you're thinking rings. You're thinking long term. And as I said, I married hundreds of kids when I was pastoring. And those kids came up and their love tanks were just flowing over. Where's your love tank now? 3/4? Half? Empty? When that happens, then the preacher like myself begin to hear stuff like, Jerry, I don't know what happened. When we dated, he was so sweet, so nice. I mean, we had so much fun together. I mean, it was just so great. And I thought life was always going to be this way. And we got married. And then slowly after we got married, it all slowly went away. I thought I'd married a Rodolph Valentino. But now I don't know. I think now I'm married to a recliner that burps. That's what I have. And guys start saying, I don't know, preacher, I don't know what happened. Man, when we were married, that woman was turned on. I mean, she was a hot potato. She was all over me, but I don't know, man, preacher. After we got married, she's a cold fish. That woman's changed. And I said, no, bud, that woman hasn't changed. That's the same girl you married. I tell you who changed, you changed. When you quit treating her the way you treated her when you fell in love. So in our marriages, we need to decide if marriage is a contract or is it a covenant. We need to ask ourselves, is marriage for life or marriage until the first bumpy road? For marriage to be a lifetime treasure, there's one question you must answer. Is my marriage a covenant or is it a contract? The Bible views marriage as a covenant. Rejoice with the wife of your youth. Grow older, having a great time with this girl you married when you were young. Be faithful and true to your wife. Jesus said, what God has put together, don't let somebody tear up. Society views marriage as a contract, and there's a vast difference. A covenant is something you keep. It's an incredible promise for better or worse, for rich or poor, in sickness and in health. For how long? For as long as you both shall live. That's the promise. That's the covenant. Probably when some of you married, when Freddie and I married, that's all we had was a covenant. We left to go on a week's honeymoon in Colorado. We had $80 cash and a Gulf credit card. Oh yeah, and an incredible promise, because the night before we stood holding hands before God and before our families. And the man that married us, will you love her? And I stood before God and said, I will love her till death do us part. That's the covenant. That's the covenant. Now, God says marriage is a covenant. Society says it's a contract, and all contracts are based upon the foundation of reciprocity. A marriage that plays out as a contract says, if you do these things for me, I'll do these things for you. Professional athletes have a contract, and as they get older, slower, whatever, the contract is not renewed. That thinking ignores the fact that people are always changing and life is challenging. Freddie and I are neither one the person we were 60 years ago when we got married. We don't look the same, we don't think the same, we don't react the same. A contract says when all these changes come, if you don't like it, you can get out of it. A covenant says, no, I will love you through all the changes. I performed a funeral a couple of days ago. I don't do many funerals because I'm not a pastor, but I did one for this wonderful couple in Cleburne, Texas. I'd preached at their church a couple of years ago, and she had just come down with Lou Gehrig's disease. And she was already in the chair, and there's a lot of stuff she couldn't do. And we all went out to eat together after service. And I noticed her husband, Jack, was cutting her food and tenderly waiting on her. And she lived about 2 years until the very last moment of her life. He stood behind her and begged God she would live. There was no romance. There was not all of the things. They couldn't go out and eat. There was so much they couldn't do. Why did he do that? Because he made a covenant that I will love you. Not just on good days, I will love you on all the days. Now that doesn't mean you stay in a marriage that's abusive or mutually destructive, but you can work it out. The grass is not greener on the other side of the fence. Irma Bombeck said this truth: the grass is generally greener over the cesspool. It's a good thought. I think the grass is greener where you fertilize it, water it, and cut it. Some people from our church wrote me back when I was pastoring. This couple had been married 37 years, said they don't understand that being in love with someone is not the same as loving someone. Being in love is not the same as loving someone. Being in love is like standing on the seashore and the breakers coming in and the waves coming in, and it's exciting, but you can't live there. Soon after marriage, you pull into the safe harbor where love can be nourished and grow deep. That's brilliant thinking. Married 45 years, we found that right up there in importance is a sense of humor. Having the ability to laugh at ourselves and all the absurdities of two completely different and totally inadequate individuals making one life together has been our salvation. Married 31 years. It took a while for us to work things out, but we stayed together. We took a few small steps at a time, and after a while, we realized we had a pretty good marriage. I have a plaque in our bedroom that says, "Marriage is the union of two forgivers." And said that about sums it up. Married 34 years, we've never thought it would be easier without each other. Good stuff. And that's what it takes. You got to work at it. It's hard work holding on to the promise. You say, what about your differences? Work through them. You say, well, my wife and I are incompatible. So what? So are Freddie and I, and probably so are almost all of you. We're totally different people. But our differences have worked together for our marriage. Just because you have some tension over some things doesn't mean you've got a bad marriage. Work it out, lower your voices, listen, take time, get help. This church has a marriage renewal. Renewal is not re-engage, I think is the word during the week. Come to that. Get help from that if you can. Life is always changing, but don't give up. Sometimes you hang on. Let me give you a couple illustrations and I'm through. Marriage is like, have you ever been to a place where two rivers came together? I talked to a young couple after the first hour, and they said, that's where we are now. Two rivers come together. Man, it is troublesome. It's rolling and tossing and disturbing, and there's lots of stuff going on. Marriage is sometimes like that. You get in, and man, all of a sudden you discover these things you didn't know, and some of them you didn't even suspect. But you know something else about the river? If it'll stay together, it flows on broader and more beautiful than ever before. I think that's what God said. Jerry, you and Freddie, keep it together. Keep your marriage together. One last thought. We need to put a stamp on our marriage that we stamp on almost everything we've got in life. It'll say, made in China, made in Mexico, made in the United States. You need to stamp on your marriage, made in heaven. Got to be willing to say, like I can stand before you after 60 years and I tell Freddie, I love you more. And if we had it to do all over again, I would do it with you. If we could go back 60 years, I'd run down that aisle to marry you. And one last thought. Some of us could probably say, if it weren't for Jesus Christ and the church, our marriage never would have made it. I bet you'd be surprised how many people in here say the thing that kept our marriage together was our faith in Jesus Christ and how he's changed our life. And when he came inside, how we're different because of him. And because of the church that surrounds me with love. And Brian and those who speak challenge us for faith and love and forgiveness. If it hadn't been for the church and Jesus Christ, we'd never make it. Maybe that's the missing ingredient in your marriage, is Jesus Christ. Maybe more than anything else, you need to come to faith in Jesus Christ. I hope you will. Thank you for listening to me.